The wind over the red plains blew like whispers of ghosts, stirring sand across broken land and shattered stone. The sky above shimmered with faint pulses of energy from the planetary shield, casting an eerie glow on everything below long since. Abandoned by most of its population, the world had become a forgotten place, a cracked shell of what it once was, and yet in one small cave carved beneath a jagged hill, a mother knelt beside her son. Lyra's hands trembled as she dipped a cloth in the last of the cool water and placed it gently on her son's forehead. Talo was barely breathing, his thin frame curled tightly, his skin dull and pale, streaked with marks that were not there just days ago. His body had been fighting, but now even his breathing was uneven, shallow flickers of movement, like a flame on the edge of dying. Lyra had always believed she could protect him. Through storms, through famine, through the violence that came after the war. She had stolen food, she had hidden from raiders, she had crossed wastelands to find shelter. But this illness, this silent, cruel sickness was something she could not fight with teeth or strength or speed. She pressed her forehead to his and whispered words in their native tongue. Words of comfort, of ancient lullabies from the old world songs her own mother used to sing long before the sky turned red and the stars became walls. Her people had once been proud and strong keepers of knowledge, explorers of galaxies, but after the war with the humans, everything changed. Borders were drawn, trade stopped, aid vanished. What was once called unity turned into silence, the kind of silence that left the weak to die, and now her son was dying. She knew there was only one chance left. Beyond the northern ridge, far past the broken towers, lay a human research outpost. It was said they had medicines, they had the technology, the knowledge, and the healing machines that could cure almost anything. She had heard it whispered in broken voices by those who had tried to go and never returned. No alien was allowed inside. They said humans had laws, rules that forbade sharing medicine with those like her. Said it was punishment for the war, but Lyra no longer cared. Talo's fever rose again, his body shivering, though he burned like fire. She wrapped him in a woven shawl, tucked him into a sling across her back, and stepped out into the open sky. Wind struck her full force like a warning, but she kept walking. Each step forward was heavy, the weight of her child pressing against her spine, her legs sore from weeks of malnutrition, her eyes half blind from sleepless nights. But she did not stop. The ridges came into view, jagged lines etched by ancient time and recent battles, blackened earth and the scent of metal and ash. She kept her head low, moved like shadow through rock and smoke, and finally, after what felt like forever, she saw at the outpost metal walls silver panels, domes rising from the land like unnatural trees, shining against the bleak sky. Her heart pounded. She approached slowly, hands raised in peace. She could call out. A sharp sound sliced the air, and within seconds, spotlights found her. Figures emerged from behind the gates, armored humans holding weapons, their stances rigid, their eyes cold. She knelt at once, lowering herself into the dirt, lowering her head, not as submission but as plea. They shouted something in their tongue. She understood some of it. They ordered her to stop, to explain herself, to identify her reason for being there. She did not lift her head. She simply whispered, "Please, my child is sick. He will die. Please, I carry no weapons. I carry no threat, only my son." For a long moment, they did nothing. The lights stayed on her. The weapons did not lower. Then one man stepped forward. He was tall, broad-shouldered, eyes like sharp glass but not cruel. He signaled to the others to lower their guns, approached slowly until he was close enough to see the bundle on her back, until he could hear the weak breathing of the child and see the bruises, the signs of illness. His face changed. He spoke into a device, words Lyra could not understand, but his voice was tense, urgent. Another figure appeared, a woman in a white coat, her eyes scanning her, quickly assessing the situation, not as a soldier, but as a healer. The two humans exchanged words, rapid, short, quiet. Then the man turned to Lyra again and spoke in the broken tongue of her people. "What do you want?" She raised her head slowly, eyes filled with tears. "Save him. Take my life. Take my freedom. Take whatever you want. But save him, the man stared at her in silence, around. Then the soldiers remained still unsure, watching for orders, watching for weakness. But the man did not speak, he only looked at her the way one might look at a storm on the horizon, not sure if it would pass or consume everything. Lyra did not move, her arms shook, her legs burned, her breath was sharp, but her eyes never left the man's face. The silence between them stretched thick and long until finally he turned back to the woman in white and gave a single nod, and in that moment, Lyra's hope flickered again, small. Like a candle but alive, the door of the human outpost slid open with a heavy sound like iron. Breathing, and Lyra stepped inside with careful feet, her legs trembling under the weight of her child, her mind spinning from exhaustion. The sudden change in light made her squint as the sterile brightness covered every wall, every surface smooth metal, and humming machines blinking softly as if alive. Two humans took Talo from her arms, not with force, but with careful hands, placing him on a floating bed that hovered just above the floor. His small body barely stirred, and Lyra's chest tightened. She reached out once just to touch his hand one last time before they moved him beyond her sight. Fingers brushed his skin, cool and faint, and then he was gone behind a sealed door, the human doctor and two others following him into the medical wing. She stood alone in the waiting hall, the walls humming with energy, the air too clean, too sharp, her body weak from the journey, her thoughts louder than the machines around her. The commander, whose name she did not know yet, walked toward her. He did not look angry or cruel, but tired, as if carrying many burdens, his armor still on his back, though his helmet was gone, and his voice was firm when he spoke. He said the child had an infection, something rare, something spreading fast, a disease not known among humans but familiar to their medical databases. He said there was a cure, one that worked through human nanomedicine machines, so small they could swim inside the body, fighting sickness, repairing cells, restoring life. But he also said something else, something colder. The cure was not allowed to be given to aliens. It was a law signed by intergalactic agreement, a law built after the war, a law written in fear and pain. She listened, her hands gripping the side of her robe, her breath caught between hope and dread. She looked him in the eye and spoke slowly, carefully, so her words would not be missed. I will give myself to you. Take my body, my freedom. Make me serve in your colony. Make me prisoner. Make me nothing, but let him live. I am his mother, and nothing else matters. The man looked away for a moment, his jaw clenched, his eyes unreadable. He did not speak. Behind the glass door, the machines blinked red and green. Inside, her son lay still, surrounded by a world that might save him, but was locked behind lines humans had drawn with sorrow and caution. A woman entered the hall, her coat marked with strange symbols, her hands gloved, her hair tied back, her eyes sharp but soft. Her name was not said aloud, but her presence felt like warmth and cold air. She walked straight to the commander and spoke in a firm whisper, their voices low, their words thick with tension. Woman said the cure was possible. The scan confirmed the diagnosis and the nano agents were ready, but the law was clear. She reminded him what would happen if command found out, if they violated policy. He remained silent. She turned to Lyra then and asked one question. Why would you risk coming here when you knew what we were? Lyra answered without pause. Because you are still human, and humans remember what it means to save a life even when the world says no. The words hung in the air for a long time. Something shifted in the doctor's eyes, something like doubt, or maybe truth. The commander looked at both of them and gave no command, but his face had changed just a little. He walked toward a console and typed something in silence. The screen lit up with warnings, with alerts, with symbols that pulsed like alarms. But he did not stop. The doctor watched him for a second longer, then turned and disappeared back through the door where Talo waited, her hands already pulling vials and tools, her breath steady. Lyra was left alone again, surrounded by silence and cold lights. Minutes passed, or maybe hours, she did not count them. Her thoughts were fixed only on her son. She sat on the floor, her back against the wall, her fingers wrapped around the shawl that still carried his scent. Her eyes wide and unblinking far down the corridor, another soldier approached, not like the others, his steps slow, his face uncertain. He looked at Lyra as if she were something strange and fragile. He asked no questions, only stood and watched. From the glass door ahead came a light. It glowed blue, then white, and then faded. The door hissed open, and the doctor stepped out, her eyes tired, her hands covered in fresh gloves. Her face unreadable. "He is stable," she said softly. "The machines are working. The infection is slowing. He is not out of danger, but he has a chance now." Lyra felt something break inside her, not pain, not relief. Something deeper, like the cracking of a wall that had held her together for too long. She lowered her head, whispering thanks in her own language, the words pouring out like water from a broken jar. The doctor looked at the commander, who stood still beside the console. "He will need to rest for days, maybe more. The treatment is ongoing," she said, and then she added more quietly, "What will you do when they find out?" He did not answer. Instead, he walked to Lyra and sat beside her for the first time, not as commander, not as enforcer, just as someone who had seen too much. "You offered yourself to save him," he said the words slowly, like they were heavy, like they hurt. "You would have given up everything." Lyra nodded, her voice low. "He is my son. There is no higher price." He said nothing more, but his eyes softened, just a little, as if something inside him began to understand what it meant to love beyond rules, beyond survival. The outpost was still silent, but the silence was no longer cold. It was waiting, waiting to see what came next inside. The quiet room where machines hummed softly and lights blinked with calm rhythm. The boy lay still, his chest rising and falling with gentle breaths. The pale color of his skin had begun to return slowly, the fever cooling the wounds, fading. The tiny machines inside him doing their work with silent purpose. Lyra sat beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm, not gripping, not shaking, only touching, as if afraid that too much pressure might wake him or break. The moment she watched him for long hours, never blinking too long, never looking away for more than a second. Behind her in the corridor, the air felt heavier. Now something unseen moving between walls and wires, like a whisper, too close to the ears, too quiet to ignore. The commander had returned to his post near the entrance, his face unreadable, his body tense as if expecting something not yet named. The doctor walked past him, a data slate in her hand, her eyes tired from worry and calculation, but her steps full of quiet purpose. She knew what they had done and what it would mean if discovered. The law was not just a rule, it was a line drawn deep with blood from battles lost and fear never healed. The law was enforced by command centers, spread across the sectors, monitored by satellites, drones, and watchers, hidden even from their own soldiers. And now, one of those watchers had spoken. A message appeared on the central console, a transmission tagged with priority. Alpha eyes only. It came from a nearby orbiting cruiser, a patrol ship known for strict discipline and zero mercy. The words on the screen were short but sharp. "Unauthorized lifeform detected, anomaly in medical records, investigation team en route." Commander read it once, then closed the message. Without a word, he looked down the hallway toward the medical wing, where a mother waited with her son, who still breathed because of his choice. He called for his second in command, a young officer named Cal, who had seen war but not peace, who followed orders, not because he lacked heart, but because he had never been asked to choose between rules and what was right. Cal looked at the commander with confusion when told of the message. His eyes darted toward the locked chamber where the alien boy lay, his voice raised not in anger, but fear. "You broke the code. You treated an outsider. They will strip you of command, maybe worse. Do you understand what this means for all of us?" The commander stood firm, his voice quiet but solid. "Let them come. I will answer with my own words." But Cal did not agree. Later, when no one watched, he sent a second message of his own, a report sealed with his clearance code, sent directly to the cruiser above. Truth moved faster than silence that night. The sky above the outpost glowed brighter than normal. A low hum spread across the hills and valleys, signaling the descent of ships, fast and black, like shadows stretching across the stars. The ground trembled slightly as 3 units landed outside the gate, each marked with symbols of authority. Soldiers stepped out in full armor, faceless and cold. Their leader moved ahead, scanning the area with sharp sensors. Their voices crackled through headsets as they requested access to the medical bay inside the chamber. The doctor heard the alert. Her hand paused mid-scan. Her breath caught. Lyra looked up at her eyes, asking without words what danger had arrived. The doctor said nothing at first, but the look on her face told everything. The threat was real, and it had come for both of them. She moved quickly, sealing the boy's bed inside a chamber that would hold pressure and temperature stable, even in a vacuum. Then she handed Lyra a cloak the color of stone and dust, and told her to hide in the storage room nearby. Lyra did not move right away, her eyes full of fear and protest. She wanted to stay. She wanted to protect, but the doctor pressed her back gently, her words soft but firm. He needs you alive, not caught. Go now before it is too late. Outside the gate, the commander stood alone, facing the lead investigator, a man taller than most, his armor lined with bright marks of judgment, his voice cold when he spoke. We received a report that you treated a non-human subject using restricted nanotech. Confirm or deny the vulvar? Commander did not blink. Confirm. The investigator did not react. You are aware this violates 3 articles of the Galactic Defense Agreement and places your rank and your team under review. Still, the commander stood, his voice steady. I am aware. The investigator stepped forward, one hand raising a scanner toward the gate. We will see the subject now. At that moment, the doctor stepped into view, her voice raised clear and firm. The subject is in critical recovery. If you open that door, now you risk his death and the collapse of containment. Investigator ignored her words, but the commander raised a hand, stopping him with calm force. You want to follow law. I understand, but understand this too. That boy is not a weapon, not a spy, not a threat. He is a child, sick and dying, and we saved him because it was the right thing to do. The investigator's visor hid his face, but his silence held weight. Then he gave a signal, and his team moved forward. Alarms rang from the sides of the building. Drones activated, lights flashed red, and a loud voice ordered all personnel to stand down and prepare for inspection. In the storage room, Lyra could hear the noise rising, the boots marching, the doors opening, her heartbeat fast, her breath shallow, her eyes fixed on the wall in front of her. As if by will alone, she could stay invisible. Then a noise came closer, the sound of someone entering the room. A figure stepped in, stopping just inside. It was Cal, his eyes wide and full of something between shame and fear. He looked at her for a long moment, and then turned away, closing the door without raising alarm. Lyra remained still long after he left. Outside, the commander stood firm as the investigation continued, his body still as stone, his voice silent, but inside him a storm grew loud, because now he knew they were not just protecting a child, they were protecting a choice that would define what it meant to be human again. Inside the dim chamber where the boy rested, the air had grown thick with tension. Lights blinked softly above his bed, casting a faint glow on his fragile form. His skin, once pale, now showed faint warmth, a signal that the nano-agents were working deep inside his body, moving through his blood, repairing the damaged cells, removing the poison that had almost taken his life. The doctor remained by his side, adjusting the flow of energy, watching the monitors, her hands steady, though her heart raced with each new beep, each new number rising or falling like the rhythm of hope. Lyra stayed nearby, eyes fixed on the glass wall, unable to speak, unable to breathe deeply, until she was certain her son would survive. The walls of the outpost had become a fortress, not by stone or weapons, but by silence. A silence held together by choices too heavy for words. The soldiers who once guarded the gate now stood uncertain, caught between duty and something unfamiliar, something that pulled from within, a strange emotion that had no place in training manuals or battle drills. Outside the command chamber, the investigation team still moved through corridors, checking logs, scanning systems, questioning officers, but nothing they found could erase what had already been done. The boy had been treated, the law had been broken, and the one who ordered it stood without regret. The commander sat at his station, his hands resting on the desk, his eyes fixed on the feed from the medical wing. He watched the boys' steady breaths. He watched Lyra's still form and felt the weight of his decision pressing on every bone in his body. Cal returned quietly, eyes lowered not from guilt alone but from something deeper. He approached the commander, slowly, not speaking at first, then whispered that the team had begun preparing for extraction orders would soon come from high command and arrests would likely follow. The commander did not respond at once, his voice quiet when it came. We did not make a mistake. Cal looked down, unsure, his loyalty shaken, his thoughts torn between the chain of command and the image of a mother who had offered everything for her child. Suddenly, suddenly, new alarm sounded across the halls, not the same as before. This one, sharp and sudden, a warning of movement beyond the gate sensors, flashed red as unknown signals appeared across the perimeter. Not human, not military, something wild and fast, something drawn by the noise, the energy, or perhaps the scent of weakness. The sky darkened quickly outside, and then the howls began, long and shrill, echoing across the hills. Creatures from the wasteland, drawn by the hum of machines and the smell of blood, creatures born from the broken parts of this world, twisted by radiation and hunger. They moved as a pack, fast and fierce, limbs long and uneven, eyes glowing with madness and need. The outer walls of the outpost shook as the beasts slammed against it, claws screeching against steel. The investigation team turned their attention to the threat, moving to the walls, drawing weapons, barking commands. The soldiers joined them, scrambling into position, ready to defend. But the power systems had already been weakened by the unauthorized access from earlier. And now the defense grid flickered, then dropped. The gates no longer held the charge needed to keep the beasts away. The commander shouted orders, moving fast through the chaos, leading the men toward the outer lines, his voice strong, his stance firm. Inside the medical wing, the doctor looked at the monitors, then at the sealed chamber. The boy's vitals were stable, but any damage to the room would place him at risk. The machines would not hold if the outer power failed completely. Lyra stood with her hand on the glass, watching the flashes of red beyond the walls, her breath quick as thunder filled the air with the sound of war. She looked at her son, then at the doctor, then turned and walked toward the main entrance. Without a word, the doctor called after her, voice full of alarm. But Lyra did not stop. She moved with purpose, heart pounding, eyes clear as fire. She reached the main hall, where soldiers were now taking positions near the inner gate, blasters drawn, sensors failing, light systems flickering, the sound of metal bending louder with each second. The commander turned just as Lyra approached, his eyes wide with disbelief. But before he could stop her, she had pulled one of the fallen rifles from the ground and moved toward the secondary hatch, a smaller side gate used for maintenance, now left half open from the earlier breach. "You cannot fight them," he said, stepping in her path, his voice filled with warning. Lyra looked at him, her eyes calm, her words steady. "I am not here to fight. I am here to protect, and if I must give my last breath to hold them off long enough for my son to live, then that is what I will do." He stared at her, unable to speak, unable to move for a moment. Then she stepped past him through the hatch into the cold night, where the first of the beasts had already begun to climb the outer ledge. She raised the weapon and fired. The blast lit the night for an instant, throwing one of the creatures back, but more came, snarling, screaming, rushing toward her. Inside the outpost, the power grid began to collapse, one section at a time, systems blinking off, red lights flashing. The commander shouted for backup. The doctor screamed for the door to be sealed, but it was too late. The outer shell of the base broke under pressure, the creatures pouring in like a wave of shadow and rage. But between them and the medical wing stood one mother, her body already wounded, her strength failing, her vision fading. Still, she stood and fired and swung and screamed, her fury louder than their hunger. She would not fall until the last breath left her lungs. Commander reached her just in time as one of the beasts lunged, claws tearing through her side. He caught her before she hit the ground, pulled her back as others covered them, weapons blazing, lights flashing. She was bleeding now fast and deep, her body shaking, her voice a whisper, as she clung to the last thread of strength. "Is he safe?" she asked with blood on her lips. The commander nodded and pressed his hand to her wound, trying to hold it together. "He is safe. You kept him safe." Her eyes began to close, her breath slowing, but a faint smile touched her lips. Her hand reaching out toward nothing, as if seeing something no one else could, and then silence, but not defeat inside. The chamber, her son stirred, breathing, steady body healing. Outside, the sky began to clear, the creatures retreating, driven back by flame and fire, by sacrifice, and something they could not touch, something human. The storm of night had passed. The broken land outside the outpost now lay still, covered in ash and silence. The twisted shapes of fallen creatures scattered across the plains. The wind no longer howled, it only whispered through the cracks, as if mourning something lost, something brave inside. The base wall still hummed weakly, with life emergency lights blinking, low power systems slowly returning, but the worst had passed, and those who remained stood in the fading red glow, not with fear, but with quiet hearts. In the medical chamber, the machines continued their work, slowly repairing the boy's fragile body. The fever was gone now, his skin soft and warm, his chest rising gently with each breath like waves on a quiet sea. The doctor sat nearby, eyes tired, hands still stained, but her face held peace. She looked at him not as a patient, not as a stranger, but as a symbol of something greater, something worth every risk. Commander stood by the door, his uniform torn, his armor cracked, his face marked with dust and dried blood. His eyes never left the boy, not even for a second. He had seen many things in his years, battles, lost cities, burned orders followed, without question, but nothing had struck him like the image of that mother standing alone between death and hope. Her body fragile, but her spirit unshaken, her love louder than law, stronger than steel. Outside in the main hall, Lyra lay wrapped in a thin cloth, her wound treated, her pulse slow but steady. She had not spoken since the attack, her eyes still closed, her breath faint but alive. She had survived barely, and now rested in the quiet corner of the same place where she had once begged for mercy, where she had once knelt to save her son. No one spoke loudly near her. They moved with care, as if every sound might disturb a dream too precious to break. The soldiers who once doubted now walked past her with soft steps, their eyes lowered, not in shame but in respect. Cal approached the commander, his voice no longer full of protest, only questions about what came next, what the response from the cruiser would be, what punishment might fall, what orders would be issued now that protocol had been broken so publicly. Commander looked at him and spoke without fear, his voice slow and firm. "Let them come, let them see what we have done, and let them ask themselves why the rules they follow could not allow one child to live." Cal did not answer, but the look in his eyes had changed. He was no longer the man who had reported the act. He was now the one who stood beside it, ready to defend it. Soon the high officers from the cruiser arrived, not with guns, but with records, with scanners, with silent judgment. They saw the alien child sleeping peacefully inside a chamber built by human hands, healed by human tools, protected by human sacrifice. They saw the mother resting in silence, her body still marked by blood, her breathing light, her hands folded across her chest as if still holding the memory of her son. They questioned the doctor, who told them every detail with a voice calm and steady. She told them of the moment the decision was made, of the risk they took and why they took it. They questioned the commander, who stood tall and offered no apology, only truth. They questioned the soldiers who had helped defend the gate, who now said in clear voices that they would make the same choice again, if it meant saving even one innocent life. And slowly something shifted, not with orders or laws, but in the hearts of those who came to judge. They saw not weakness in this act, but courage, not betrayal, but something closer to the word they had forgotten, compassion. A message was sent to Central Command, not a report of failure, but a statement of change, a request to review the ancient law, to reconsider the cold silence that had lasted for too many years. The war was over long ago, but its shadow had stayed, and now in this small, forgotten corner of the stars that Shadow had been challenged not by weapons, but by the hands of those who chose to save instead of obeying. The days that followed, Lyra finally opened her eyes, her vision blurred, but her heart steady. The first thing she saw was her son beside her, awake and smiling though still weak, his small hand reaching toward her. She took it gently, tears falling freely across her cheeks. But this time they were not tears of fear. They were tears of quiet, joy of reunion, of survival. The commander entered the room and stopped at the door, his presence no longer heavy with command but light with respect. He said nothing at first, only nodded, then spoke softly. "He is safe, he is strong like you." Lyra tried to speak, but her voice cracked, so she only smiled and whispered the words she had carried for so long. "You saved him." "Not just him," the commander said. "You saved us all in ways we do not yet understand." Later, when the sun returned and the sky opened again, the people of the outpost gathered outside where the dust had settled and the land stretched wide beneath the stars. They did not speak of war. They did not speak of law. They spoke of what had happened here, of what it meant and what it could become. Lyra stood beside her son, both of them wrapped in new garments, clean and warm, the commander beside them, the doctor watching from a distance, her eyes soft with quiet pride. One by one the humans stepped forward, some with gifts, some with apologies, some with nothing but their presence, each one placing a hand on Lyra's shoulder or bowing their heads, not because they had to, but because they chose to. The story of what happened here spread far and wide across the systems, across borders, across language. It became a story not of rebellion but of renewal, a story of a mother who walked into the heart of those who once destroyed her kind and asked not for revenge but for mercy, a story of humans who remembered what it meant to be more than soldiers. Story of a boy who survived not because he was strong, but because love refused to let him go. And in that story, something new was born, hope, the kind that does not fade, the kind that speaks without words, the kind that reminds every living soul that even in the coldest corner of the universe, there is still room for warmth, there is still room for humanity. The end.